I really don't feel like cooking today. Readers, this edition of Readus Relives is dedicated to my experiences with one of my favorite directors, Zack Snyder. As far as the DCEU is concerned, the obvious reasons are obvious. He kickstarted the film series with the movie Man of Steel. His decision to include Batman in the follow-up helped solidify that the Justice League will be happening. And with Warner Brothers going through the plans to bring the DCEU to life, Zack Snyder is now basically to DC as Marvel is to Kevin Feige. Or Feige. Because I just don't know how to pronounce his fucking name. Now, I give that comparison because every single director that's in charge of interconnecting DC properties, David Ayer for Suicide Squad, Patty Jenkins for Wonder Woman, James Wan for Aquaman, has to go through Zack Snyder in order to plan how things are going to go and to make sure things mesh well with what already exists within the DCEU. During his filming of Dawn of Justice here in Detroit, he called up a local radio station because he heard that the hosts were talking shit about Aquaman. Like everyone else who wasn't aware that he was already sweet before Jason Momoa was cast. Just to take them to school on how sweet of a character Aquaman actually is. And all of his information was right. Both pre and post New 52. What more do you fucking want? But despite the boner that I currently have for the guy regarding the DCEU, I've had a boner for his directing skills that's lasted more than 4 hours. Which probably means I need to get that checked out. That doesn't sound healthy. So with that being said, here are my top 5 favorite movies of Zack Snyder that I've seen. Because I haven't seen his remake of Dawn of the Dead. I'm just gonna admit that right now. Number 5, Sucker Punch. This is considered to be the weakest of Zack Snyder's movies, and I have to agree. Whereas the fantasy visuals are fucking awesome, the execution of the story could have been handled better. Now that's not to say that the concept of Sucker Punch was also. I actually found it rather intriguing. I'm just saying that if you were open to have somebody polish up the script at the time, kinda like another writer whose movies were more successful because of it that I'll talk about next week, it would have been better with a lot more moviegoers, and definitely higher on my faves list of his. But I will say this is definitely a learning experience for him, and I'm kinda glad that he made this movie. Number 4, 300. Oh, I'm sorry. You're expecting me to put a Frank Miller written story in my top 3? Just because it was my first Zack Snyder film? And the reason why I like him as a director? Well, if you thought that, then you were surely mistaken. 300 was good. The visuals were stunning, and it was the second movie I ever saw that presented scenes straight from the comic book that it was based on. The first one was the first Sin City. But at the end of the day, I acknowledge the talent, the cinematography, and the direction more than the story. Because it's still a Frank Miller story we're talking about. A first installment Frank Miller story, which tends to be the best whenever he's writing series. But a Frank Miller story nonetheless. Number 3, Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole. Now, a few words of discretion. I have never read the books. Until I saw it, I didn't even know that this story had a series of books. But I love this fucking movie. Every time I watch it, I get sad. Because I think how much better Sucker Punch would be if Snyder just put that much attention to the story as he did the visuals. Now trust me when I say that an explanation wouldn't do it justice, especially for me. So I'm just going to recommend that you find a copy somewhere and watch the movie. Watch the fuck out of this movie. As soon as you're done watching, liking, and sharing this video, and then watch this movie. Number 2, Man of Steel. Well, if you didn't see this coming, then... Meow. Honestly, I pretty much mentioned everything that I liked about this movie in my previous video. If you haven't seen that video, a link to it will be at the end roll of this one. But other reasons include great visuals, awesome fight scenes I always wanted to see in a Superman movie even though DBZ otakus had access to them since day one. Just all the stuff that I wanted in the movie the moment I realized that Zack Snyder was directing it, that I actually got. Number 1, The Watchmen. I feel like this is the movie everybody assumed would be my number 1 when they found out that 300 wasn't, and everyone thought would be my number 4 when they thought that 300 would be. Confused? Me too. Let's keep going. Not being that familiar with the graphic novel, I thought this movie was excellent. But people were pretty divided on it for different reasons. Casual moviegoers were turned off at the idea of an R-rated superhero movie. Fans were turned off of it because it wasn't absolutely faithful to the source material. And Alan Moore was turned off. Because he's Alan fucking Moore. Me, on the other hand, found the film to be absolutely faithful to what I remember reading of the graphic novel, and felt the changes that were made were both minimal and necessary. It was this movie and seeing 300 that made me ponder what Snyder would do for a Kingdom Come film. A movie that I still want him to do, and if he will give it as much dignity and respect as he gave Watchmen. But of course, I'll happily settle for the DC Extended Universe. So readers, your homework assignment for today. List in the comments section below your favorite Zack Snyder film. Anyways, this is Readus 101. Class dismissed.